So here we are in the middle of the Caucasus Mountains, this incredible tangled knot of mountains stretching from the Black Sea to the Caspian Sea. And I've been spending a lot of time in these mountains over the past couple of years working on a project called the Trans-Caucasian Trail. And the goal is to build a hiking trail that will stretch from sea to sea across these mountains, connecting the national parks of the region into one single network of long-distance hiking trails. So what I've realized over the past couple of years is that this idea is a really powerful idea. It's a big idea, it's really ambitious, but the powerful thing about it is that it brings people together behind one single idea. A lot of people want to participate in an ambitious idea, they want to get involved, they want to get their hands dirty and push the idea forward to make it a reality, even when you think it's impossible. So that's what I want to talk about today, is about building a trail, but also about building a community around the trail that will really push that idea forward. Now, first, a little bit about these mountains that we call home. I know I don't need to educate anyone in this room about the Caucasus, but I did want to mention some astonishing facts. This mountain range is a relatively compact mountain range, about 1,000 kilometers from east to west, 1,000 kilometers from north to south. But in that small area, you have some of the largest ecological and cultural diversity in the world. It's actually one of the most linguistically diverse regions of the world, with over a dozen indigenous languages spoken. And it's the most ecologically rich area of the world per kilometer outside of the tropics. And the variety of landscapes is just incredible. I mean, imagine being able to spend a month or 2 months or 3 months hiking across the Caucasus, from the glaciers and forests of Svaneti to the subtropical rainforests of Ajara, across to the volcanic plateau in Armenia, or the wide open valleys of Tusheti in eastern Georgia, onto the high steppe in Azerbaijan. It would be incredible, right? I know you're all convinced. The pictures are convincing enough themselves. Now, I'm sort of an unlikely advocate for building a trail across the Caucasus. I'm not from the Caucasus, unfortunately. I'm from the cornfields of Indiana in the US. But I first came to Georgia in 2005 as a Peace Corps volunteer. And I taught English for 2 years in a small village on the Black Sea coast called Khutsubani. And when I wasn't busy teaching English, I was out walking in the hills above my village, exploring the mountains and getting to know Georgia. And that's how I really got to know Georgia, was on foot, walking around, meeting people, speaking Georgian, drinking wine. And I've always loved walking. When I was a teenager, I would convince my brothers to drive down in the summertime to the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, which were the closest mountains to where I lived. And we would go backpacking along the Appalachian Trail there. And the Appalachian Trail is a long trail in the US, stretches for about 3,500 kilometers along the ridge of the Appalachian Mountains. And when we were walking on that trail, I was just captivated by that idea that you could keep going for weeks or months and along that same trail. And I really carried that with me later in life. And after Peace Corps, I ended up moving back to Tbilisi and working here and exploring more of the national parks in the region, visiting Azerbaijan and Armenia, visiting the mountain regions of Svaneti and Tusheti and Racha. And that's when I really started to think about maybe it would be possible to create a long-distance trail here in the Caucasus. So I was kicking that idea around in the back of my head for a couple of years. And in 2015, I decided, you know what, I'm going to try and just put this idea out there, see what happens. So me and my friend Jeff Hack, who is another Peace Corps volunteer with me, we decided to spend the summer looking for trails that cross these mountains. And we got our maps and our backpacks together. We headed out into the mountains. We had this vague plan that we were going to cross the Caucasus. And we weren't starting from scratch, of course, because people have been crossing these mountains for centuries. And there's ancient trails that go between villages and trails that have been created by trekkers more recently. And there's this wonderful community of mappers and explorers in the Caucasus that have done a lot to develop those trails recently, to mark them and map them. But we quickly learned that there were a lot of gaps. And even where there were trails, the trails were in pretty bad condition. It was really hard to walk them. And if you actually wanted people crossing the Caucasus, hiking this long-distance trail, they would really need to be improved. So we failed pretty miserably in our goal of crossing the Caucasus that summer, but we found a lot of really great resources. We found a lot of really amazing unknown routes, and most importantly, we met a lot of people who were really inspired by this idea of a Trans-Caucasian Trail and really wanted to help us make it happen. Even some people who had a similar idea themselves, like my colleague Tom Allen in Armenia, who had a similar idea of creating a long-distance trail across Armenia, and he is working to develop the trail there now. So we were so inspired by all of these people who wanted to get involved that the next summer in 2016, we decided we're actually going to try and improve one of these big sections of trail. And we chose this section of trail in western Svaneti, west of Mestia, because a lot of people are hiking east from Mestia to Ushguli, but really nobody was hiking this trail in western Svaneti. It was in really bad condition. It was hard to find. Nobody really knew about it. So we knew we'd need trail crews to go out there and help us improve this trail. And we put out a call for volunteers. We told people, we're going to be working in the mountains. It's going to be cold. It's going to be wet. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're probably going to be miserable. But remarkably, we had 20 people from a dozen different countries sign up to come out and volunteer and work on these trail crews, including people from Georgia. And we also had a crowdfunding campaign at the same time to raise money to buy tools and to hire a trail design expert who would help us improve this trail. And dozens of people from around the world, and some people here in this room, contributed to that, giving $10, $50, $100 to help us make it happen. So we gathered in Svaneti and we got to work. And we got to work building bridges, building drains and check steps, and building new trail. And it was really hard work, but it was also a really good time. Most of the volunteers had never done work like this before, and they ranged in age from early 20s into their 60s. And despite all of the hard work and the fact that we had to carry in our own food, we had to sleep in tents at night, everybody had a really amazing time. I think there's something really special about spending time out in the mountains and spending time in nature, doing physical labor, and working together without the distractions of cell phones and the internet, that really brings people together. You know, I've never seen a group of people come together as fast as a trail crew. They learn to work together and communicate and solve problems despite all of their differences in age and gender and nationality and experience. So we were really successful last summer that we continued the program again this summer, but we expanded it. We worked in Svaneti and also in Dilijan National Park in Armenia. And we had over 120 volunteers from 17 different countries come here throughout the summer, including dozens of people from Georgia and Armenia working on our trail crews up in the mountains. And we want to continue to expand this volunteer program and get even more people from the region involved next summer, because I think it's a really special thing to have people from across the Caucasus coming together and working on something that benefits the region together. Now, of course, we built bonds as a trail crew, but we also, one of the really special things about this project has been building connections with the communities that the trail passes through itself. And a good example of that is the community of Kichkaldashi in Svaneti. And my friend, Valeri, who lives there, who I met 2 years ago when I was scouting trails in Svaneti. And I was trying to find the trail to Kichkaldashi. I was going from Saleri, a small village, down into a river valley, and there was this raging river that was fed by the early summer snowmelt. And I couldn't figure out a way to cross it. I couldn't find the bridge. And it started raining, and I was wandering through the stinging nettles, and it was really kind of miserable. So I decided, you know what, I'm turning around. I'm going back to the village I came from. And when I got back to the village, I called up Jeff, and I told him I couldn't find a way. And he was supposed to meet me in the next village. And he said he had met this guy, Valeri, who said he could come and help me find the bridge. So they gave me some directions, and I wandered back down towards the river for about 40 minutes. And then suddenly this guy emerges from the mist, and he takes me by the hand and shows me the bridge and takes me up the trail to his village. And when we get there, his wife is there and his grandchildren, and they bring me inside. They let me dry all of my clothes and warm up, and they made a huge meal. And as we were sitting there sharing this meal, we learned that Valeri and his wife Maro are the last people to live in the village Kishkoldashi. The village has been there for centuries. They actually have an 800-year-old church in their backyard. And when Valeri was born there in the 50s, there were about a dozen families, he said, still living in the village. But over the years, young people moved to the cities. The older people in the village died off, and a lot of families left in the 80s after some really hard winters in Svaneti. And now it's just Valeri and Maro. And as we were sitting there sharing this meal with them, I just thought it was such a privilege to be there and to experience this hospitality and to get to know this village, which is kind of on its last legs. And I wanted to do whatever I could to share that experience with other people. And so this summer, we brought volunteers back to Kishkoldashi. We worked on a section of trail that had been washed out by a landslide. And Valeri helped us replace the bridge that he had showed me 2 years ago because it had also been damaged in a flood. And we camped near the village. Valeri brought us milk in the evening, and at the end of the week, we all shared a meal together. And it was an incredible experience to have the volunteers there. And it was really special for Valeri and Mara, too, because they could see the possibility of some life returning to their village. And Valeri said he thought that if we had more people visiting, more tourists, it might be a reason that other families would return to the village, at least for the summer. And so it was when we were working with Valeri this summer that I really started to think of the trail itself as a community. You know, the trail, you might walk it alone, but it's really a record of all the people who have come before you, and it's there for all the people who are going to come after you. It's all the people who work together to help improve it. It's all the people you hike with, but also all the people that you meet along the way. And when you have that in mind, it really makes the trail into something much more than a strip of dirt and a series of bridges and signs and blazes. It's really a way for people to connect with the mountains, communities to connect with each other, and for people from around the region and around the world to connect with each other. And so I think we usually think of mountains as barriers, as boundaries, and they are. They're what's created all of this incredible diversity in the Caucasus. But they're also bridges. They're what ties it all together. And the mountains here are what everybody in the region has in common. And they're a great place they're big enough to make you feel small, and a great place to really work together on something larger than ourselves. Thank you.